Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Should we wait for a few more minutes or shall we get started?
Yes, sir, you can start, sir. They are joining.
Okay, fine.
Yes.
Maybe I'll wait for one more minute and then I'll get started.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Okay, I think we can get started now and let the folks who are joining in can kind of come in, right? So, good afternoon, everybody. And today's session is going to be a continuation and a follow-up from the last session that we had, where we talked about visualization and importance of data in terms of creating the right visuals and interpretation, and how do you present that data, and that's what we had talked about last time. So in continuation of that, today we will learn how to use your PowerPoint, or your any other slides, presentation, etc., wherein we are able to create a visual storytelling through these tools. How can we bring your presentation to life with a storytelling? So if you recollect that, like last class we had talked about how storytelling is important, how using the data to create those graphs and visualizations are important, how what were the different components of storytelling, how do you start, how do you continue, and how do you kind of end, what are the basic etiquettes of when you are kind of looking into a storytelling point of things. And today we'll see how it's actually created using maybe a PowerPoint, which is the most commonly used tool. Sometimes people use Google Slides also, which is nothing but very similar to a PowerPoint, but then again how do you create those presentations and kind of tell a story. So continuation of how to tell a story using a tool like a PowerPoint, what should be the strategy, what should be the approach, is something what we will learn today, right? This is going to be useful and it will come handy to you in your current class or your projects, or even if you're working on certain projects wherein you have to present a story, or you are doing some internship, or you are kind of working in an organization. Everywhere the storytelling is important and PowerPoint is kind of used, right? So hence it is important that this tool or this platform is something what we learn very well, so that we know we are able to think how to kind of present those stories when we have to kind of make those presentations, right? So I will share my screen and I will play the videos, and then we will see what interesting options we have in terms of seeing the storytelling exercises. And then of course we will have questions, or we will have kind of interactions as we regularly do, right? So I'll start sharing my screen, um, and I'll start playing as well. Please let me know if you're able to hear.
Hello, my name is Joel Simmons, and welcome to.
Are you able to hear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. So I'm going to play again, and then let's start it from here. So first is bringing your presentation to life with a storytelling. And We'll talk about how different storytelling makes, what is it that, how to use a PowerPoint, the hallmarks of an effective presentation, the framework that you do when you're creating those slides. So all these things we'll talk about in this storytelling format, right? So let's listen.
Hello, my name is Joel Simmons, and welcome to Visual Storytelling in PowerPoint. Now, believe it or not, PowerPoint, despite being known for bullet points, ugly charts, and low-res clip art, is actually perfectly suited to captivating visual storytelling. But how do you take a typical dry all-hands deck, or a Q4 finance update presentation, or a really important pitch deck and bring it to life? Well, when we apply a classic story framework to it, we start to create something far more compelling, something a little bit more magical. We start to create depth, intrigue, and rhythm to create something fantastic. Just by identifying the parts of a typical story, applying them to our presentation structure, and sprinkling a little visual pixie dust on our slides, you can take your next presentation from a boring, dry report into a solid story that will keep your audience engaged every time. And more importantly, one that will have them remembering key points and facts long after your presentation is over. So that's what we're going to do in this course. We're going to learn about storytelling, what makes a good presentation into a great presentation. Next, we'll do some hands-on work to learn how to create effective, compelling stories that will leave audiences engaged and entertained. And lastly, we'll learn some tips and tricks on how to actually deliver the story to our audience effectively. So let's dust off our gear and ready up for adventure because the story is about to begin.
So throughout this presentation, we will not only hear about how a story is created, what is the framework which we will be using, but we will also see some real-time examples from a PowerPoint. What are those features, or what are those tools, or what are the options available in the PowerPoint which is being used to create? So that's going to be important for you to make a note and also remember to apply it when you are working on the PowerPoint, right? So we'll see both of these things. So let's move on to the next one.
I've seen hundreds and hundreds of presentations in my career, and the first thing I do is to go through them to initially assess what we're working with. Is it dull? Is it too short? Is it too long? Who's the audience here? So many things are going through my head, but the one thing I always try to make sure is there's some kind of personality and story to the deck. Does it have soul, or is it just a bunch of numbers? What's the big idea here? Why do we care? So many things are going through my head when I look through them. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through this in practice with this all hands deck here by Two Trees Olive Oil. Now, just some quick background on Two Trees. They are one of the biggest olive oil companies in the United States, and they're actually pretty big in the world as well. So they're not bad at all. They're not number one, but they are killing it. They're doing great. And this is their all hands deck. So it's really important. This is a really big quarter for them, and they really want to kind of hammer home some things. So what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of take a look at this deck now and see what's in here, see what we have to work through. And this is the deck we're going to use and bring a little bit of story to, a little bit of soul to. So if you look through here, you can probably see we have an agenda slide. We have year in review, so that's always pretty important. You have some stats. We have some sales slides in here. Looks like we have tons of charts. We'll have to do something with these charts because they're a little rough. We have a marketing section. Yeah, so we have some stuff in here. It looks like some stuff about their campaign, some campaign highlights, I think about their product, and some environmental challenges. As you can see, it's a report, not a presentation. It's basically like, this is what happened. Okay, bam, this is what we did this year. We want to bring a story to this. We want to make this compelling. Even though these are just the employees of the company, we want to take them on a journey as well. We want them to care about Two Trees. We want them to be rewarded with all the work that they're doing. We want them to know how well they're doing. And ultimately, we want them to leave this presentation feeling empowered to go do their jobs and be even better than they were before. So that's the message we got. And we have to find a way to inject that message into this Two Trees olive oil all hands.
Yeah, so I'll pause for a moment. So the examples you saw in this slides right now is basically, it's a presentation, it's not a storytelling. And the challenge given to these author and the team was how to convert this existing into a storytelling format. A lot of times when we do our presentations, or I'm sure you folks would have also done a lot of presentations where you would just have 20 different slides and you will just highlight like this is the number, this is the sales, or this is the marketing metrics, etc. But that is just talking numbers. How do you convert that into a story? And typically organizations also kind of, a lot of times make this mistake, and hence the art of storytelling becomes important. And this is the challenge that has been posed here. And let's see, like, how this entire deck and the slides is now converted into a storytelling format.
Deck. So before we get into visual storytelling, let's make sure we're setting ourselves up for success. Let's first break down what makes a really great presentation a great presentation. It has to do a lot of things well. First of all, it has to convey information. This is a no-brainer, but presentations exist to inform our audiences. So basically, it's a vehicle to store and disseminate information and ideas to an audience. Sometimes it may be presented live, sometimes it may be emailed or printed. Either way, it serves to inform. Next, it has to be memorable. Why create something that people aren't going to remember? Are you just going through the motions, or are you trying to create something that will remain with your audience after they've seen it? Next, it has to entertain our senses. How do we create something more memorable? Are data points and charts enough to do that? Will tiny blurry graphs keep us awake through an 8 a.m. meeting? The answer is no, it won't. Next, it needs to serve as a complement to the speaker and not be the main focus. While a lot of people use presentations as a crutch, they're actually supposed to serve as a support system for the speaker. The speaker is the reason people are there, not the deck. So we don't want this to be a wordy, cluttered presentation. We want this to be a complement to the speaker. Lastly, it needs to tell a story. The story is the very backbone of the presentation. It's what takes a flat, lifeless PowerPoint deck and transforms it into a well-crafted, effective presentation. As you can see, a good presentation is a true workhorse. So before we get into visual story, okay, so let's break down the framework for a typical story. These are the elements that may be present in any story, whether it's a novel, a movie, or presentation. It's the what, the why, and the how. We can even see how storytelling
Very important
is
to
present.
keep in mind the what, the why, and the how. So this is the format that, like, one would kind of typically follow in the storytelling: the what, the how, and the why. Right? Let's hear more.
Present and an important part of at an amusement park. Think about a typical ride at Disneyland, where storytelling is an absolute art. Every part of that ride's experience is a story. It's what makes the ride more of an experience versus just getting on a carnival ride at the local fair. So the first thing we usually are introduced to in a story is the setting. This is where the action takes place and where we learn about the environment that our story takes place in. It can be a beautiful, lush landscape or a hostile, cold, alien world, and it sets the overall tone and mood for the story. So when you get in line at Disneyland, you're already being transported into that world, and you can start to get excited for what's ahead. And presentations are no different. A setting for a presentation could be the current fiscal year or the marketing department. It could be your company's competitive landscape. Basically, it's the environment or arena we're dealing with in the presentation, so we know where we are. Now, visual storytelling is a big part of creating the setting, but more on that later. The next big thing we learned about in the story is the hero or the main characters. The hero, the villain, the townspeople, these are all the people who carry the story along and will ultimately shape the outcome of the story. So if we're getting on a Frozen themed ride at Disneyland, we'll probably be following Elsa's journey. In a presentation, the character can be customers, your employees, or even the person giving the presentation. The character is the one we're using to create a relatable connection with the audience. So remember that. Next is the actual journey we're about to go on. Now, this is the actual ride we're going on at Disneyland. You're strapped into your seat and you're about to be whisked into a dark tunnel of unknown wonders. Now, there'll be some moments where you might be laughing, others where you're terrified, and others where you feel relief or joy. This is the journey that we take our audience on. It keeps them engaged and on the edge of their seat. Next, we have the very important conflict or turning point in the story. This is when the big moment or crescendo happens to the character, and ultimately it'll affect the outcome of the story. It could be a large drop on that theme park ride or one where the villain threatens our character. In a presentation, it could be where we ask for more budget and the bad things that happen if we don't make that change. Or maybe it's a heaping of praise after going through a bunch of stuff at work and just letting everybody know how much they're appreciated. The turning point is the reason we're here, and everything should be pointing to it. Lastly, we have the conclusion or resolution. This is the happily ever after, the to be continued. A nice tidy bow to wrap the story up. On a theme park ride, it's when you exit that dark cave and you're delighted with happy music and sunshine, letting you know that everything is okay. In a presentation, the conclusion serves the same purpose, but more importantly, it's where we give our audience an idea or action item to walk away with. So very important, we don't want to just send people away without having an idea for them to take away with them, okay? That's a big one. So everything else can be moved around, but that conclusion or resolution always has to be at the end, and it always has to have a purpose. So let's remember that. So this is where we talk about data versus insights. So data is just raw numbers. It's what it is. You know, these are how many sales we had in the West. This is how many sales we had in the Southwest. But when you start to color the data, when you start to find insights, then you can actually start creating the story, which is why we're here. We're trying to learn how to tell a story from numbers. So let's look at the West right now. So we're going across here. We see in Q1, they did 243. In Q2, they did 663. So already I'm noticing a big gain here in the second quarter. Then it looks like they went down in Q3 and they went way down in Q4. So right now, looking at that data, I'm already seeing that they started low. They went high in Q2. They declined and they really fell off in Q4. So that's an insight I just found just from looking at that data there. Let's look at Southwest. They started high, went down low, stayed low, and then really bounced back in Q4. That's another insight. So West started off strong. They fell way off at the end. So West has to do better. That's an insight. Southwest dipped down and really pulled it out the last quarter. So we're starting to already develop insights here. Plains look like they started high and really fell off in the last quarter. So maybe some of these teams are not working as hard as they need to in the last quarter. Some of these teams are doing amazingly. So maybe it's on their managers. We can figure out so many things just by looking at this chart and taking out the data and making it into an
So
insight.
critical point to remember here is, how do you convert the data into an insight? Data is easy because you will have your Excel sheet, you will have your larger sources of data, and you kind of dump data. But what do I make out of the data? Just by looking into this entire thing, what is being shown right now, we see that Q1, Q2, Q3, and Q4, there are some sort of numbers. But what is the pattern we are able to identify? So as an insights person who is making a presentation and who is kind of telling the story, you need to connect the dots. Connecting the dots becomes important. So things like, okay, West looks like there has been increase and a decline and a decline. Southwest, there has been a sharp increase in the last quarter, right? Similarly, if you see South, then there is going to be a good Q1, a little bit of flat Q2 and Q3, and then in Q4 again it kind of rises up. So there could be multiple factors why this would have happened. Maybe there are some economic factors, maybe there are some layoffs, maybe there are some business priorities, maybe certain things have changed, and maybe certain teams are working better than the other. But all these interpretations needs to come from this data. So when you are looking into the data, then the important thing would be to how do you utilize this data to actually interpret what's going to happen, and what could be the probable cause certain things have happened. And that's important to keep in mind, that converting a data into insights, which is a very, very important criteria for a storytelling, right? So let's listen more.
So let's look at something like this chart here, this amazingly beautiful low resolution chart here. Now, this is the year-to-date report. I can't even tell you from looking at this what this means. I would hope they wouldn't present this just like as it is. But what we can do is find some insights within this slide. Right now, it's just data. This doesn't tell me anything. Well, one thing this does tell us from looking at it, and I think this is why a lot of people use charts, is you can see that there's progression, right? You can see that each one of these, the East, Central, and West, they all started here and they all ended up pretty high. So one of the insights we're getting just from looking at it visually is that the East really has outperformed everybody, right? It looks like everybody started kind of near the same and everybody made an improvement. So that's an
same thing
insight.
what we talked about in the previous slide, it was just boxes and data. Now, if you convert that into a graph, into a line graph, then you are able to kind of, see it visually as to how the insights are kind of, coming through. So converting the raw data into a visualization through a graph also helps to derive insights and hence storytelling. That's the key takeaway here. So if you are working on a presentation, this is what you should be keeping in mind.
You can also even look at some of the months. April, everybody did almost the same. What happened in May? Looks like Central went down, okay, but West went up. So you can start to even develop some insights just by looking at data. So I just want to hit home what the difference between data and insights are. Data is the raw number. Insights are actually the color you give to these numbers, and that's going to enable you to actually tell your story. When you get in there and you have slides like this, you can get those insights out and you can start doing some really cool things by displaying data in really interesting ways rather than just charts. And we'll delve into that a little bit later on into the course. Establishing the setting of your story is an extremely important part of the storytelling process. It puts parameters on where the story lies and informs your audience where all of this will take place. It basically adds context. So our setting for this all hands here is the Two Trees Olive Oil Company, and they're pretty much their competitive landscape. So let's say the Two Trees Company, all its competitors, the employees, basically anybody in that ecosystem, that's pretty much the environment we're going for here. So that lends itself to lots of, I think, olive oil imagery. Maybe I can get some good shots of employees that work at the factory, just kind of show some of the employees. But I think maybe just having kind of an olive oil theme. Now we need to know who the main characters are in this story. So who's keeping the story moving here? I'd say, again, the employees, since it's an all hands, the employees are the hero here. I think they're the ones that are pushing Two Trees forward. Knowing that there are heroes, let's make sure all of our messaging going forward will be from their viewpoint. So now we have our setting and now we have our characters. All right, next up, we're going to talk about the journey. What journey are we going to take the employees of Two Trees on when we present this deck to them? Now, right now, when I look through it, I see there's not a lot of journey in here. If we look at our agenda, we just have our year in review. We have some sales updates, marketing updates, whole bunch of updates, strategic planning, and environmental update. That's not a lot. That is just basically presenting facts from each department, but it doesn't really have a story in it, okay? So that's one of the things I want to look at here for this journey. I want to go ahead and weave some storytelling into this deck to make it more of an experience. So one thing I'm thinking we can do is maybe we start off with the history of Two Trees, let them know where Two Trees started from, their humble beginnings, and maybe show where they are today. And today could be most of the information that we're showing today. And then we want to show the future of Two Trees, maybe what they are going to be doing in the future to become the #1 olive oil company in the country and in the world. Now, one little thing I did notice hidden way down here is this environmental challenges slide. And I read through it and it was basically hidden in here, but it looks like Two Trees is one of the most efficient olive oil growers in California. Actually, they're the most efficient in the world, and they use recycled water and innovative technologies to save over 1 million gallons of water a year. Now, that is huge. That is really big. It's just buried in here. And the biggest thing here is they plan to license their technology next year to competitors, with the goal not being profit, but for the greater good of the environment. Now that is huge. These two bullets right here are huge. This is the future. I think we could probably use this as our where they're heading in the future. And yeah, I think we have our journey pretty much set here. So let's go ahead and see what else we can do to make this deck really sing. All right, so here is the one that always kind of trips people up a little bit. Usually when you think about the conflict or the turning point in a story, there's a conflict like these two gruesome guys here going up here to battle. But it doesn't always have to apply like that in a presentation, especially a business presentation. It's really the big idea. It's the one true crescendo of the entire deck, the main idea. Now, our deck, again, 2 trees of olive oil. You've already seen these blue slides for a while here, but I promise you they're going to get worked on very soon. You're going to see. But what is the turning point? What's the big idea in this deck? I think the entire gist of this presentation is to let everybody know, hey, you're doing a great, great job. Okay, you're doing an amazing job. Keep doing what you're doing. If you keep doing what you're doing, we are going to make our goals and we're going to be the #1 olive oil company. So this is not a bad thing. Again, if we see these guys here, this looks like there's going to be something bad. Not every turning point or conflict or big idea has to be something bad. So I thought this is a good example to use. This is actually a really positive presentation, but there still has to be a main rallying cry, a main big theme here. Lastly, we have the resolution. Now, this is one of the most important things you can have in a presentation. In a typical story, I wouldn't even say the resolution or the ending is the most important thing. Sometimes the journey is the best part of a movie. I've seen some amazing movies where the ending absolutely stunk, but I love the characters in the journey. In a presentation, the resolution is the most important thing because it serves as not only an ending, but also a call to action. The resolution gives the audience a direction to follow after they're done with the presentation. In our presentation for 2 trees, I think the resolution is twofold here. One is for the employees to work harder to keep up that amazing work. We really want to pump them up, make them feel great. But at the end of the day, we want them to work harder so they can become #1. Second, I think they're doing some really amazing stuff in the future. They have this new technology. Let's give the employees hope knowing that they have this new technology. They're saving all this water and they're licensing this technology to other companies. So that's a really big thing. There's going to be a lot of revenue and it's just going to get people super excited. So now that we know all of these different parts of the story that we've identified here, I'm going to go ahead and start working on this deck and add a little visual magic. And we're going to take this thing from this boring blue and white template and make it really, really cool. I cannot wait to see that, and I'm sure you can't either.
So we have seen how the context setting has been done so far, like defining, what would be the hero content in the storytelling, creating the journey in the presentation, basically taking the existing data and showing that, what kind of sales have happened, what kind of trends we have seen, the employees who have worked hard, etc., and stuff like that, right? And of course, the resolution as to what is the key takeaways. So we have now discovered what is it that we would want to talk about. In the next sections, we will actually see, using the PowerPoint and the different features, how do we build them. And this section is very, 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 very important, so that you are able to actually see which tools are used and how it is built, etc. So make a note of it, and it will come in handy when you are actually creating these things, right, in your presentation. So let's see how we are using those different variations of PowerPoint tools to create them, right?
Okay, so now it's the fun part where we're going to transform this kind of dark blue lifeless deck into something a little bit more upbeat and classy. So what I did was I went ahead and found some pretty good olive oil related stock photography, and I pulled together a bunch of that stuff, some olive oil up close, that gurgle of olive oil there. I thought that would make a good slide. Things like this, just showing olive oil production. Also have some other things I got from 2 Trees Olive Oil internally, so they sent that over to me. So we'll be able to use a lot of this stuff in our deck, and I think it's really going to make a big impact. All right, so what we're going to do here is, now that we have all this imagery, I'm going to go ahead and design some of this stuff live here and just show you kind of how I'm thinking we can create some interesting slides out of these images. So right here, this is the original slide, Product by Donald Roscoe. Okay, so we can do better than that. my overall desire is to lighten this deck up. Now, luckily, Two Trees Olive Oil, they do have a white template as well. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to that white template and use these white backgrounds. I think this looks way better. And I also am making sure that I have the Two Trees Olive Oil logo down at the bottom. So that's the one change I made to the template. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a section break or a title page. So for product update, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and what I'm thinking is maybe I'll have a full bleed photo over here on the right, and then I'll have product update over here, and then maybe Mr. Roscoe's name underneath it. We have a whole bunch of text boxes. Mr. Roscoe's name underneath it here, okay? And then what I was thinking after that was that I can insert a photo. So I'm just going to go to insert, and then I'm going to go down to picture. There's other ways to do this. I'm just doing it this way because it's easiest. And I'm inserting a picture. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find something like this olives close. I can just hit my space bar on a Mac here to do a preview. That looks great. And I'm just going to insert it on my slide like this. Okay. So this is kind of what I'm thinking, a rough version. What I'm thinking, maybe like this product update, this name here like this. And then maybe what we can do is put an icon or something above this to show what section we're in. So one of the things we can also do, which is really cool in PowerPoint, is you can insert icons. These are built-in icons, whether they're online, built-in icons, royalty-free. You just go ahead and download them and you're done. So product update, let's just type in, it's kind of a weird one, update. Oh, that's kind of cool. I'm under stock images, icons. I typed in update and I got this kind of interesting little icon here. So let's use that for update, hit insert. You'll see right in the middle, we have our little update icon. You can go ahead and change that color to whatever you want. So that's what I'm thinking, something like that. Now, one other cool touch I think that I could add to this is there was that really interesting drizzle of olive oil image. So what I'm going to do is go to insert, again, picture from file. And I think it's, let's see, drizzle. Here we go. I'm going to insert drizzle. And what I'm going to do is just shrink this down. I'm holding shift at the same time on my Mac to scale that down. I'm doing Shift Option Command B to send it backwards. Okay, something like that. So I'm thinking something like this, where I have this splash of olive oil in the background, this icon. We could do something different. I don't know, maybe darker like that. So that's what I'm thinking, something like that, and just kind of adjusting it. So the cool thing is I've actually already gone into the Slide Master and I've created a template for this. So let me go ahead and show you quickly how I made that, and you can see that I'm pretty much already have made this. So let's go to our slide template here, the behind the scenes. So this is the slide template I made right here. You see it has a photo box so you can insert your photo, and all I'm doing to make these placeholders is I'm going up here to insert placeholder. You can insert text placeholders or picture placeholders. That's what I've done here. Icon placeholder, the text style, and I've done that. What I'm going to show you real quick is if I do a new slide here and choose that particular layout, you can see right here, I can type in product update, and then I can come over here to insert the photo, and I can go to olives close, insert it. I can go to icon placeholder. I can just insert this here. Yep. And you can see, I just have to crop this. It's a little bit strange. Okay. You can see that. Change the color. And what's the name? Donald Roscoe. So I just want you to see that you can actually make your own template slide. And so now if I want to create a whole bunch of these, I already have a template for it and I can easily just pop in my picture. So now I have this template slide and I can use this all throughout the deck. It's going to make a real big difference to make sure that everything looks clean and cohesive. Okay, so now that we've created one of these title slides or interstitial slides, let's talk about their importance in the world of storytelling. Each time you see one of these, it serves as a breath in between each section. It lets people know where they are in the presentation, so you instantly know where you are when you see one of these slides in this deck. So we know we're on to a new section. So one of the things you can actually do with these sections is create a rhythm throughout your entire presentation. So You can instantly see if you have too much information in one section and not enough in another. You can see if one is just going to go too long just with these section breaks. So look overall at your deck and you can kind of see how your presentation is breathing, if that makes sense. If there's a one huge section and one tiny section, it's just going to feel a little bit off. So pay attention to that. So one of the other things I decided to do on our particular deck here for Two Trees is to not only have these section breaks for something like a product or a marketing update, but I'm also going to create these other larger section slides talking about the history of Two Trees, where they are now, where they're heading in the future. So let's go ahead and take a look at how we're going to do something like that. So I created this quick template here with the full bleed photo option here. So I'm just going to click that photo button and I'm just going to pick a nice, let's see, maybe, yeah, this is good. Let's use this olive machine background. That looks perfect. And what we're going to do is I have this box here. It's just a black box with a little bit of transparency on it. And I'm just going to go ahead and drag this over the entire slide like this. Okay, and I already had a bit of text in my template slide. And I'm just going to go ahead and maybe move this text over here to the right. And this black transparent box, you can see, has really created a cool effect here where I have a photo in the background, but I can still place white text over it and do whatever I want. So that should be pretty cool. So I'm going to take this Two Trees olive oil logo and move it over here to the left. And then we can do something like our history. And that looks pretty good. And maybe we can do something like get a line here. I'm just going to use the line tool, draw it, and let's make it white. Let's move this over a little bit over to the right. And I'm just going to adjust this real quick here. And I think that will look good. Let's look at what that looks like. Yeah, that looks really good. So this is going to serve as an identifiable large section break. And I think this is really going to pace our story really well and let us know where we are in the presentation. So this slide in conjunction with the other one we just created will really help create the pacing and help the overall flow and storytelling feel for our deck.
So what we have seen here are a couple of things. One is in the first one, we have seen how using tools, you can insert imagery and then insert your logos, etc. And so that there's a consistency. And second, we have seen that using page breaks, what you're seeing here right now, our history and how do you typically talk about it, right? So various sections is what you will need to add so that there is enough of break. Otherwise, it becomes mundane. So for example, if you have 20 different slides in your presentation, the audience needs to understand where exactly is the break and the next section is starting from. So this is an example of how you are able to create that section break by using different PowerPoint tools, right? So now let's look at how we would be bringing in more color to the story, different ways to show data, etc., illustrating with charts and graphs and stuff like that, right? So let's see animations and how do we do that. Let's see that.
Okay, so one of the things I think we really can do to make this deck look a little bit more dynamic and just a little bit more inviting is to change the colors up a little bit. Now, you already saw that they have this interesting kind of dark blue background. It's a nice blue, but it's really heavy. And I think just adding some accent colors and lightening it up, it can look a lot better. So as you can see, we already started doing that with this slide here. We use that same blue as our text color, but we just use the white background. So this slide right here has a lot of great color. And I think what we can do is actually we can create our accent colors for the entire deck just from this slide right here. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and make a quick color palette from here. And you can't always do this. Now it's your job. I'm not going to say, hey, go mess with your color palette. Generally, that already exists. But in this case, we have a little bit of license. It's a really big meeting. The template is just not very dynamic and it needs a little love. So in this case, we have a little bit of license to mess with the color palette. So who knows, this might make it onto the bottle next year. But what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create some boxes down here at the bottom. Right now, they're white, so you can't really see them. But I'm going to basically create the color palette by going up to Shape Fill, going to More Fill Colors, and I'm just going to use our little eyedropper tool, and I'm just going to go ahead and sample the color. So we're going to sample that blue color first. So that's our first color in the color palette. The second one, we'll do the same thing. more fill colors, our eyedropper tool, and I'm going to sample this olive oil, this nice yellow color here. I think this signifies the olive oil and it just will give it that feel. So now we have that color there, and we have our last box here. I'm going to do the same thing, and I'm going to sample the olive color here, this green, fresh olive. Let's get something like that. Does that look too dark? Let's get a little bit lighter one. Right here is our preview, so you can see that looks good. That's light. So now if you see these three colors, you can see how they match the slide already, and it gives it a really fresh overall look. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to apply this color to the rest of the deck, and I think it's really going to give it a cohesive feel and keep it light and fresh. And just for kicks, what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to add these colors into your color palette if you've never done that before. So what I'm going to do is go up to Format, Theme Colors, and you can see I have a Create Theme Color box here, and we have some accent colors in here. I can tell that the previous designer that designed this deck never really messed with the accent colors. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to go ahead and add these now. I'm going to add that blue, and I can even call it blue. And then let's see. And then we're going to go to the second accent color. I'm going to sample that yellow. Name it yellow, right? You see what I'm doing here? I'm just going to create 3 of them and then sample the green and then type in green. So now in my colors up here, anytime I go to shape fill, now I have my colors already in here. These are the 3 colors that I just added, and they're in my theme colors. So this is going to help me all throughout my deck now that I have those colors set, and it's going to make my life so much easier. So if you remember before, I was showing you this slide earlier and showing you how to make insights from data. So again, we are just looking at this chart here, and we just have dates and numbers, and that's all. And I think we could do better. I think we can find a story within this chart here. And I think the way we can do that is basically looking at each one of these divisions, East, Central, and West, and just looking at what the story is here. So what I think is the most important thing, if I want people to feel positive about the work they're doing, let me look for the positive in this chart. So I can see that everybody's really worked hard over the year, and maybe some months, some people have stumbled or some groups have stumbled and gone down, but overall, everybody's really worked hard and ended the year on an up note than where they were in the beginning. So that could be the story that I'm trying to tell here. So what I thought I could do is for each one of these, I could determine a value for each one. So let's say West, let's say this first point here is about 120. And let's say it ended up here at the end of the year at about 210. Okay, so you take those 2 numbers, you basically is showing the growth between those. So what I did was I went through each one of these and developed the percentage increase. I actually figured out how to calculate the percentage increase for each one of these numbers. So I can see that the East has gone from 75. I just put it down here in the notes. The East has gone from 75 all the way to 310. Now that is a really big rise. They've gone up 313%. Okay. So I did the same thing for West, 110. They went up to 205. And I did the same thing for Central. They started at 60 and went all the way up to 140. So they did a 133% increase for Central and 86% increase for West. So I basically took those numbers and I made slides with those. So I just didn't even want to show this chart. Why show this chart? It's cool, but it's just too much, or it's not enough. It's just boring, right? So that's what I did. I took those big numbers and I made these slides with these stylized arrows here. So just wanted to make something that looked really cool. I used this interesting olive oil background and, black transparent square. And that's what I made here. So you can see I even animated those. So if I play these, you can see they go through, and we're just talking about the increase here. That's how we're coloring the data. This is how well everybody did at the end of the year. Everybody is up. So from that chart, we've developed some insights here and really colored the data. We could have made that a bad slide. We could have said, hey, look how well you guys did, but look how well you could have done, or look how you guys really failed in August. We could really have done that too, but this is what we decided to do, and this is how we colored the data. And that's how you can go through and really make sure a lot of these charts, these ugly, useless charts that people are showing, you don't have to do that. Find an insight, find a way to bring that data to life on your screen, and you're going to really create some compelling slides.
The key takeaway here is how to make your slides easy and simple and actually show the story. So if it's a 313% increase or a 133% increase, then show it in a simple format versus a very cluttered slide which has a lot of line graphs and bar graphs, right? So that was the key takeaway here. Then we'll see how we can illustrate with charts and graphs and bringing in action with animations, how animations actually help the entire slide creations.
Sometimes using charts are inevitable. As much as I want to get rid of charts, sometimes they are just really effective in showing things in a presentation. And this slide right here, it does tell a story. It does show your upsells, your services, your products. And just at a glance, you can tell which one is doing better than the other. You can see the trends. So there is a place for charts, but we could just make them look better. So one of the ideas I had was, since this is an olive oil company, maybe we could do something like this where we have these olive oil bottles, and maybe we can make each one of these represent like a bar chart here. Like one of these bars, we'll use a bottle for that. So what I decided to do first of all was I got this stock photo of olive oil bottle, and I'm just going to go to picture format. I'm going to use crop, and I'm just going to choose one of these olive oil bottles, maybe like this one here. And I'm just going to crop this guy just like that. Perfect. So now I have this bottle here. And what I decided to do also was to just attempt to animate it. Is there a way I could actually show this bottle getting larger? So the way I decided to do that was I'm going to go to picture format, and I'm going to go to crop again. And I'm just going to go ahead and crop like maybe this part of the bottle off. And I'm just going to option click, shift, move it down a little bit. And I'm going to crop it again. So what I'm going to do is crop the bottom part, or leave the bottom part and crop the top part off. And you'll see why I'm doing that in 1 second here. Okay, so now I have two of the same bottle here. And I'm just going to move this up. And that looks pretty good. That looks pretty solid. So what I want to do is, first of all, move this to the front. And let's move this down like this. Perfect. Okay, so now if I can move this top part down, you'll notice that it looks like it's getting shorter, right? So, obviously this is not going to be super perfect. If you really zoom in, you can see there's a little nit there. So we can drag it up till it looks pretty good. That looks pretty decent. So what we do is, if we use our morph transition on the second slide, let's say we wanted this to be tall like this. And in the first slide, we wanted it to be short like this. All we have to do is to go to our second slide, go to transitions, hit morph, and you're going to see that grow just like that. So if I do a full screen, you'll see little bottle, big bottle. So after that, I went ahead and messed around, and I created some options here for some animations here. So what I would do was I would have the 3 bottles with the 3 areas, and then to introduce each quarter, instead of having all 4 quarters on one chart, I decided to break them out. So each quarter has its own slide, and we can just do something like this where the bottle animates up, and you can see on the chart where each of the category is, using an olive oil bottle instead of just using some bar charts. So thinking outside the box, trying to get a little bit clever, you can do some really interesting things. And you see I did some other things here. I did a version of the chart where I have all of the bottles representing each one of the bars. And I went through and did some other things where I grayed out some other ones so you can find your insights out of this data. And not only that, we also animated our bottles too, just to give them just that much more life. People would definitely not be expecting an animated olive oil bottle coming in. But yeah, we're killing it. Compared to this, we are killing it. So just think outside the box and have fun with it. So this is one of my favorite parts, where I get to create a one-off slide, a really interesting slide with some animation. I want this win slide. It's happening pretty early on in the deck, and it looks like it's a really important slide. So I really want this win slide to stand out. So while it looks great here to have these bottles and this text here, I just think I can do a little bit better and make something a little bit more compelling. So I'm going to use some animation here and just use some visual polish to make a really cool slide. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go to this next slide here. So I already have this nice image here of a bottle of olive oil, and it looks really classy. So I'm figuring I can use this as some kind of centerpiece for this 2021 win slide. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and resize it. I'm going to make it nice and big. And I'm going to put it something like this, okay? So let's go ahead and make this text white. Okay. And what I want to do is have this 2021 wins be really big. So let's do something like this, 2020, and then type in wins, something like that. Oh, okay, how about this? We do this smaller, and we do this wins like really big. And what I think I want to happen is we're going to use this Two Trees logo. There we go. So we got some Two Trees olive oil there. And what I want to do is I want this 2021 wins to come behind this bottle here. Now, that's asking a lot, but if you have a little bit of knowledge, if you have some Photoshop knowledge, this can really help you out to do some really cool things. I'm going to go ahead and show you what I did. I already have the bottle and the spoon and the leaf already cut out right here. So you can see I can size this just right to now sit right on top. So if I bring that image to the front, remember it's just the bottle and the back is transparent. If I bring that to the front, I just use Shift Command F on my Mac. You can see now that we have this image that's to the front. So if I zoom in, you can see, our wins back here. Unfortunately, see now this is in front, so I can't click directly on it. See our bottles in front. So you can see, if I move this over, you can see, let me move it over some more. You can see that now we can move this behind that bottle there. So that's going to be part of the magic we're going to do right there. And you can see our text actually looks pretty good. I'm just going to make this background black to match this over here. So I'm just going to format the background and make it black. And you can already see, if we hit play, what this kind of looks like. Okay, our 2021 wins is not quite on the screen yet. Let's zoom out a little bit here. And what I'm going to do, I just have to bring that olive oil logo to the front as well. There we go. All right. So I'm going to, there's a lot going on over here. I'm going to bring this 2021 wins, and let's see, you can see it over here in the preview. I can kind of see if it's getting in frame. So it is. That's perfect. So what I'm going to do is bring everything over a little bit like this. Again, I'm looking over here on the left, and that's looking good. And what I'm going to do is just bring 2021 wins maybe like up a little bit so you can still read it. Okay, something like that. So now when you see this, you can see it just adds a little bit more depth to have that bottle in front of the text. And then if we animated this, if I use my morph transition, what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this slide. And on the first slide, I'm going to have the 2021 wins off the slide completely. I'm just going to move it off. I'm going to move this text off as well. There we go. And I move those off. You'll see when I play this, those two things slide in. That is one of the techniques I use all the time, just under transitions, morph. Just create two versions of the slide and then move the elements where you want them, the first and the second slide, and that's going to create your morph.
So pretty cool way of how you create two slides, create a copy of the other, and then use your transition to actually bring in the animation, right? So and if you have noticed how smartly this was done, and you can try this too by using the animation feature, which is available in the PowerPoint, right? Now that we have learned about the imagery, the color, adding the color to the story, etc., bringing in action with the animations and all, it is very important to ensure that we create a very powerful ending. The ending is got to be very important, right? And then making the story flow with the transitions and how it kind of typically appears. So let's look at how the ending is supposed to be made powerful.
So I've been hard at work trying to transform this deck from that dark blue, dull presentation we started off with into this more dynamic, brighter, more inviting presentation here. You see, we have not only the visual story framework going on here, but we also have a traditional story framework going on here too. So if you remember, I talked about these section headers, these darker ones with the photos in the background. These are like a large section. And then you have these smaller sections within it, like this product update and the marketing update, year in review, things like that. So we have that flow going on. We have these big sections, smaller sections within, where the company started, where they are now, and basically where they're going after that. So that's the entire flow of the presentation. That's the story. Obviously, the visual storytelling is, look at this entire palette we have going on. Look at all that green and that fresh yellow, that olive oil yellow color I took from this splash of olive oil up here. It really just brightens up the entire deck. And even though we have a lot of light background slides, there's a lot of dark background slides in here too. The contrast looks really interesting. We still use that blue color in some places, but this is a really lighter palette, and I think it works really, really well. So one of the things I do want to talk to you about is the ending. That's something we didn't talk about before. We can present all these facts, tell the story, but what do we want people to leave this presentation thinking? Well, due to the insights we found through this entire presentation, we found that we left some money on the table, okay? There's a lot of money that we could have capitalized on last year. We didn't do that. So we go through all these stats here and we basically find out, hey, we messed up. So we created this slide here that has a huge number. Hey, we left $5 million on the table last year. We can do better. This is what we need to do better to become number one. So this is the climax slide. This is that slide that you're just like, people, you're going to get a little bit tenser in your seat when you see the slide. It's no happy colors. There's no, happy people smiling in the background. This is a stark black slide with white text on it, and it looks pretty serious. So this is something we want people to take notice of. Now, there's a little bit of palette cleanser after this, how we're innovating for the future. This is a really big slide talking about their technology that saves all this water and basically how they can license this technology and create millions of dollars in income in the future. So this is a really big slide. It just pop in at the end, but it's basically saying, hey, we have some really great news. This is going to make us one of the leaders. Along with your hard work, this is just going to propel us into the future to become like the best olive oil company in the world. So we have that. And then at the end, we just basically are reiterating the things that the company needs to do in order to become number one. And we address the technology, we've addressed all this good stuff, our quality of our products, everything. And then we have a nice simple, we can do this. So basically, this is like, hey, goodbye. Thank you for coming. But these are the things we want you to do after you leave this presentation.
So a very powerful ending in terms of what would you want the audience to take away with? And that's important. And that's where he says yes, we can do this. And that's how you're kind of ending the story, right? It will be interesting to see how you make the story flow with the transitions. And that's going to be the conclusion of the entire presentation. So let's hear how that kind of happens.
Okay, so I'm going to take you through this deck now, and I'm going to show it to you full screen. But what I'm going to do is actually remove all the transitions from this deck. This has no fades, no nothing. I just want you to see what it looks like when you have zero transitions. So we're just going to go through the whole thing. We're just going to go ahead and click through, and I'm just going to kind of click through quickly. But we have our agenda slide. We have our thank you slide, humble beginnings, product update, labels. This looks pretty good. Marketing update, marketing org. That's nice. Interesting little oil animation there. Okay. So you get the point. You see we're going through. It looks nice, but there's, I want you to kind of notice what this feels like, the flow of this. Just think about how it looks as I'm going from slide to slide. It's just very clean, robotic, clinical. I wouldn't even say clean, clinical. Just goes through and that's it. So that's the slide without transitions. Now I'm going to go ahead and show you a version that has transitions in it. And one of the things I definitely use a lot is the morph transition, and I talked to you about that earlier. I can show you how I built one real quick here from slide 2. See, I have this olive oil drizzle up here, the thank you team, off the frame. So you can't see it over here on the left. Okay, so this is what you're seeing over here on the left on screen. This is off the frame. And basically, I'm going to have these two things slide in on the next frame. So here, those two things are going to slide down. So you'll see when I play this, those two things slide in. Okay, so that is one of the techniques I use all the time, just under transitions, morph, just create two versions of the slide and then move the elements where you want them, the first and the second slide, and that's going to create your morph. So I do the same thing all throughout the deck. So that's how I do a lot of things is morphing, but you'll see. But I'm just going to go ahead and quickly go through this entire deck, and I'll walk you through. This is a great time to kind of show you what everybody's thinking and what the whole flow is here. So, okay, we start off with our agenda. Thank you, team. Get the people all riled up. We talk about our humble beginnings. And notice the feel here. There's nice, subtle movements, nice, clean, subtle movements here. Nothing's jarring. It has a different feel, has a different rhythm to it, rather than that hard, jarring feeling. So I'm really just showing you this to show you the reason why we do put these transitions on there, why we do put these fades on. It just makes things calm and smooth and just polished. Look at all these little animations, just really subtle movements here. Man, it's just a good looking deck. This is really going to keep people's attention. And I think it really does a great job of highlighting the brand. It looks classy. I mean, I really love these slides so much. Remember these charts that we had here before? We got rid of a lot of charts and just used our insights instead of just having a whole bunch of data up. We created our own bar charts out of bottles here. And we did some cool things with the animation here. I love this. And this is where we also used insight. We took data from those charts and realized we're leaving money on the table. There's a whole bunch of money we were missing out on. And these are the ones that are highlighted here that we need to work on. Then we have our we can do better slide. This is, whoa, we need to do something better here. And how we're innovating. And then these are the things we need to do to become number one. These are on click with animation. So we can really talk about these when we're presenting this. And we can do this. Okay. And this is a really strong slide to end it. And then lastly, you have your Q&A slide. So I think we've done a really good job of pulling this entire deck together using this visual storytelling, using our traditional storytelling elements, creating this whole atmosphere with this beautiful olive oil imagery, using the product that we're talking about here. This is olive oil company. Let's show the imagery. And doing a great job of letting the employees know they've been working hard and they're doing great, but they could do better. And the company is on the verge of doing some really great things in the future. So I think this deck has done a great job of taking them on a journey. It's kept them entertained. And I think at the end of the day, they're going to remember this when they go forward with their day.
Great. And we'll stop our presentation and sharing here so that, we'll see if there are some questions which we need to answer. So I hope, all of you got to see how by using, data and the storytelling, we are able to create the right kind of animations and right kind of presentations and the right kind of transitions. So it all boils down to that storytelling, right? So any questions the team has on this? And you also saw that the various ways in which you can utilize your PowerPoint and the tools and the different features, etc. Of course, it requires practice. It will not happen in one single day. But I think the idea is you should be looking into this presentation and looking into this recording and trying this out at your end so that you're able to do that. So any thoughts, any questions? Anything at all?
No, sir, role play.
Okay, sure. So if there are no questions, then we can conclude our class today. I would encourage all of you to really look into this and try out in when you're working on the presentation. These are the different tricks which you can try, and ensure that it's more of a storytelling format, right? So, Kyunin's Karnataka team, you there?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So I think we can conclude our class today.
Okay, sir.
Like, and again, the students will obviously get to see this recording, etc. So in case there are some more questions, they can always come back.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.